This one is okay. It's okay.
Okay. So we'll proceed. So proceed to inheritance. So like we all know, inheritance is when we are trying where we use is a mechanism where one class allows us to gain the properties of another class. So say we have a particular object and then we want to inherit some of the properties of that. Is anybody speaking?
Hello.
Okay. So say we have it.
There was a little break in network. There was a little break in network. I don't know, maybe it's general. So is it just the encapsulation that you wrap up on?
Yes. Is it what?
I don't know. Is it just the encapsulation alone that you have talked about?
Yes.
Before me coming up here?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Okay. So as I was saying, so inheritance is when you allow one class to gain the properties of another class. So in this case, you have your parent class and then your child class. So it's also another way of it's also another concept of another principle of. Please, can you mute your mic? It's a bit distracting. I don't know whose mic is on. Peter, please, can you mute your mic? Okay, so I was saying inheritance is when you have a base class and you have a parent class and a child class. So it's also another principle of OOP. In this case, we are trying to also minimize the lines of code we write. So where you have a couple of methods or properties in a particular class, and you want to have those properties in a new class, we use the concept of inheritance in this case. So this is an example. So like in this case, we have your student class inheriting the class person. I think I have person here. Okay, so that's what I have in the squiggly line. So in this case, we're having the student class inheriting the properties of the class person, right? And so here now, because class person has a constructor, when you're having your child class, you also have to reference the constructor for the parent class. So that's why we have to instantiate the constructor for class students. So this constructor here is referring to the constructor of the parent class, right? I don't know if you understand. People understand the concept. Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So that's why we have the constructor have referencing this base property, which is the name property. So then we move to the next one. I'm just going over what you have learned. Then we have abstraction, right? Which is when you're trying to hide irrelevant data about an object, you know, to reduce complexity in our programs. And so in that case, we work with abstract data types here by using their interface without even knowing the methods on that class. And so when you want to reuse a method in your abstract class, that's when we have the override and the virtual methods. I know people are familiar with all of that. So to access an abstract class, it must be inherited from another class, right? So quickly, I'll go into interfaces now. So I didn't give you an example of abstraction because it's almost similar to interfaces. So which is our class for today. So for interfaces, interface is another way of achieving abstraction in C#, right? And it's actually the best method. Instead of using the abstraction you were taught last week, in this case, we reference interfaces as the best way to achieve abstraction. So you have your parent, you have your class, and then you have a different type of class, which is called an interface, right? And so whenever you are inheriting the interface, every property and every method in your interface you must exhibit those properties on your base class, right? So interfaces are also known as contracts or specifications of behavior, which means that if your class is going to inherit a particular interface, it means that that interface is telling you what your class should have, the properties your class must have. So once you're inheriting that interface, every method that is listed in that interface, your class has to also have it. Now, the difference between interface and abstraction, why we say interface is better, is because for abstraction, you can't have a class inheriting multiple classes, right? So like in this case now, where we have our student class inheriting the person class, we can't have this student class inheriting, say, maybe another type of class. So even if I create that class, it's going to throw error. Even if I create this, at this point now, I'm having this squiggly line because it doesn't exist. But even if I create this class, this group as a class, it's still going to throw an error. If I should, okay, let's just go ahead. Right, but in the case of interfaces, when you have multiple interfaces, your class can inherit these interfaces. So it just means that that particular class will have to exhibit all the properties of each of the interfaces that you have referenced your class to, right? So they said, so as I was saying, C# does not support multiple inheritance, like we mentioned, meaning a class can only inherit from one base class, as we have in our abstraction. But however, if you want your class to inherit multiple properties, say maybe you have a dog class and you want your dog class to inherit the properties of animal, you want your dog class to inherit the properties of a carnivore, something like that. That you can only achieve that with interface. So the only thing you just need to do is when you're implementing it, like I did here, in this case, let's assume your person is an interface. You just use a comma and then you add it, right? So let's go to our code. This is an example of muted. So this is an example of how we have our interface, right? So the type is interface. You have your type interface and the name. Now your interface can have properties and it can also have methods. Now the thing with interface is that in your interface, you don't have to define the method. You just add the type. This is the type, this void here means the type that you are expecting the method to return, and then the name of the method. If the method has parameters, you also include it, and then that is it. You don't include the body like you normally do in your class, right? So this is an example of an interface implementation. So let's look at it here. So we have our class cow now. And I said class cow inherits the interface animal. Now, if I uncomment this method, and let's say this method now, you can see the squiggly line. Now you're seeing that we're having this squiggly line, and what does it say? It says cow does not implement interface member can fly an animal sound. So meaning even if I add a different method here, let's say public void make sound. You're still seeing that we are still having this squiggly line, which is telling us that we have an issue in an error in our code, right? So it's saying that once you say your class is inheriting a particular interface, you must implement all the properties of that interface. If not, it's going to throw an error. So in this case now, if I implement all of this, now the squiggly line goes away. I don't know if people are following. Please, can anybody indicate?
Yes.
You're following. Okay,
I'm
thank
following.
you. Please, if you're not following, kindly let me know, or if I'm going too fast. So thank you. So okay. So yeah, so that's what we have here now. So like we have in our interface, you can still have other methods, right? You can have other methods, but so long as your class is inheriting a particular interface, you must have those particular methods and properties that you have set on your interface. So that's why even with this extra method I added here, we have no issues with it. We can reference this through the class. Okay, so let's do a bit of let's run our code to see how this works. Yeah, okay, so this is the interface. Oh, sorry. Okay, so at this point now, we're instantiating this class, my cow. Okay, so when we step in, we're saying that the point of instantiating my cow can fly is false. Okay, yeah, because we have already set it here as false, and then so can a cow fly, true or false, and then it returns false, which is the response we get from the property can fly. And then we also call this animal sound. We asked it to call this method animal sound, and we're expecting it to return a cow moves, which it does. It logs it in our console, which is what we have here, a cow moves. Okay. Please, are we following? Please, are we following?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So so like I said, this is just how interfaces work. Basically, like I'll repeat myself, basically you have an interface. Okay, then I should also let you know. So we know that is considered good practice that whenever you want to name your interface, it's normally the interface normally starts with the letter I. Okay, so in this, it doesn't mean it won't work. Like in this case, I left mine as animal, right? But standard practice, or should I say good practice, it's normally the interface name usually starts with the capital I. And so someone looking at your code will always know that, would kind of understand that this class you're referencing could be an interface, but it doesn't mean if you do it the other way, it won't work. It's just good practice so that it will help you remember, and other people that are also looking at your code will also be able to remember. They'll also be able to remember that, okay, you're referencing an interface. So so I'll go to the second example I have, which is an example that references multiple interfaces, right? So this is it. So here we have this class bird, and we are saying the class bird is inheriting the interface animal and also the interface living things. I think I've not, okay, I changed the name, that's why. So it's referencing both animal and living things. So when we do this, it means that that class is supposed to have all the methods you have in animal, the properties you have in animal, and the same thing in living things. Every method and property you have in living things too, you're supposed to reference all of that in your class. So if I remove the properties of if I comment out the properties of living things now, you're going to see that it's going to throw an error, right? Yeah, because it's going to tell you that you have not yet implemented that member of the living things interface. So it's essential that when you're inheriting, always remember that whatever you're putting in your interface, you intend on referencing it in your base class, right? And so it still works the same way. So like we have in our animal, we have can fly, animal sound, all of that. So like we have here, so we have the can fly, house has 4 legs, your animal sound, move, reproduce, and everything. And so if we instantiate this class, we can reference all these properties and all these methods. So if I'm to run that, let me run that here. Okay. So yeah, so this is bird. They're referencing the object bird. Okay, so now we want to reference the method bird.animal sound. I think you all are familiar with it, and it's going to return a bird chips, which is what we have in the method on our class bird. And then we have want to write in our console bird has 4 legs, which is false. So it logs that in the console. Bird.move, it logs that a bird can fly. Now we write what does a bird reproduce? Okay, so this is console read line where we are going to enter what a bird produces. So egg, let's say egg. So in this case now we want to call the method reproducing bird, which is this, and which is expecting a string as the property of the method. So we expect it to return that baby birds are called eggs based on what I passed as the parameter. So good. So that's what we have here. Then we have response bird, can it fly? So whatever response we have as our bird, can it fly, is supposed to return can fly. And if we check from our constructor, we have already instantiated can fly as true. So we expect it to return true as the response. So that's what we have here, true. Okay, so that's basically how interfaces work. I think it's a very should I say short and simple concept, right? So I don't know if anyone has any questions for me. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Let me
Yes.
ask this.
Okay.
A class can what's the word? Implement
A what?
a class can implement an interface.
Yes. A class can
Can it go the other way around? Can an interface maybe extend a class?
No.
Oh,
Like I said initially, our interface is And an interface can only declare methods and constants. So if you see from our interfaces, the methods, we are not, it doesn't have a body, right? So it's basically not doing anything. It's just like a framework. It's just telling you what the framework of the class that is inheriting it should look like. You understand? It doesn't have the body of or the action that the method is going to take.
I get.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions again?